In this video, I'm going to review the new SLA table, which makes reporting on SLA and SLA definitions much easier. So at the top here, we have the new SLA table chart type. And you can see it's a trend table, so we have things divided into months. We have some different coloration, red when we don't meet a target, green when we do meet targets. So let's just go through this one by one and I'll show you how to set it up. There's quite a few settings on this, so it'll take a little bit of time to review, but I think the power is there and you'll appreciate the end solution. Now below, on this example, I've already added a couple tables just so I can see the data. I have the incident SLA grouped by SLA definition. So this is just a count of how many incidents I have grouped by the SLA definition. So like in January, we have 3 of the priority 1, we have 1 of the priority 2, and 3 of the priority 3, and so on. Now, below that, we have same grouping, and it's a count of how many of those SLAs were breached. So we didn't have any, in January, we didn't have any of the priority 1. We had 1 of the priority 2, and that was it. So let's go take a look at how to set this table up, and I think it'll start providing some more clarity on how you can use the chart type. I'm going to go look at the SLA table first. So we got our task SLA table. So we got 41 of these SLAs that have been recorded, and I have this grouped, I think. Let's go ahead and so in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our SLAs that have been breached. And they're all the red ones up here. And then all the other, so 36 of them have not been breached. They're different SLA definitions and, the information here associated with the SLAs. For this table, what we're going to look at is the breached versus non-breached month by month. So going to do some reporting on this data here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to make a copy of this table, and I'm just going to delete this chart, and we'll start from 0. Now, a couple things when we get started, just for the definitions of this. We have a column called achieved. The achieved is simply the count of SLA records that we have that are non-breached across the different time buckets, and we'll look at that. So when we add conditions to this chart, those first conditions impact the records that are counted for achieved. We have another column called total incidents, and it will take the first conditions we give and all the data returned for the second conditions we give to get a total count. This will make more sense as we start to set up the chart. Okay, I'm going to go into chart, and if we just do SLA, we have this SLA table. We can take a look at it. We can see that's what we want, so I'm going to say use this chart. Okay, now the data again is tied to that task SLA table. And again, we have first conditions, second conditions, group by, date range. So let's just leave the conditions alone to start, and we won't provide any conditions. Let's do group by, and we want to group by the SLA definition. The date range we'll do this year. Date field, we're going to do the start time, which if we go over here to our data, start time is when the SLA record started. You could use your stop time if that was your preference. Could possibly use the created date. Depends on how your data is formatted, but start time makes sense for us. So I'm going to use start time, and we will trend this by month since that was the example we used. Limit, I'm just going to say 10. Now this would limit the number of groups I have. So in this case, the number of SLA definitions that I want to look at. I'll say 10. even though I believe I only have 3 SLA definitions in use here. I'm going to hit save. And then if we open that up, we will see we got January, February, we got all of it. Now, I didn't give any conditions here, so these numbers don't make sense. So again, achieved is a count of all. Let's go look at that definition again. Achieved is the count, the total count of SLA records that were non-breached across all the time buckets. So what we're seeing here, and then total incidents is a count of all records that meet first and second conditions. So what you're going to see here is achieved is 14, and then we're just going to double that here for total incidents. Now, the reason why that is true is because this is first conditions and this is first plus second conditions for total incidents. Because I gave no conditions, it's literally counting everything. So 14 and then 28. Okay, so let's go ahead and then actually just to confirm, we got 14, 14, 13. This is the count that we also have, 14, 14, 13, and then again double. So let's go set up the conditions so we get what we actually want out of this. We'll go back into data. Our first conditions, we're going to say has breached, because what we want, and we're going to say has breached is true. Okay, let's go ahead and save that and see how that achieved column changes. Okay, so now we can see that we just get 2, 2, and 1. Now we're going to go and set, so let's go look over here. Has breached, we got 2, 2, and 1. So we got 5 total breached, which makes sense. Let's go back here and look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we're good. But now we need to make sure that our total incidence is counting what we want. Now for total incidence, we'll go back in here and we'll say second conditions. Now we're going to say has breached is true, or we want to count everything. So let's just say has breached is false. So it's going to give us all of them. Hit save. There we go. So we got 16, 16, 14. Okay. I messed this up. Actually, I don't want to do has breached is false. We already have that. So let's go into data. Okay. So I already have, again, this column takes the results of this column and this one. So we actually want just false. So now we have true and false. That should be correct. Okay, so we're good. So we have 14, 14, and 13, which is 14, 14, and 13. 2, 2, and 1, 2, 2, and 1. Okay, so this is correct. Now we can start styling this so we can have some answers and things that we want. First thing that we probably want to do is put a threshold here. So let's go into our style menu. We have this SLA styles option. And there's a bunch of things that we can change here. I can have a threshold for every one of these groupings. So in this case, I got my SLA definitions. I'm just going to say 90% is our threshold for each of these. Okay, so 90% is the threshold. Ooh, I did this backwards also. So achieved is probably not what we want there. Achieved, I have these backwards because achieved would not be, if we achieved our SLA, it means we did not breach. I got these turned around backwards. Yikes. Okay, so has breach is false and has breach is true. Save. Okay. this looks much better. Okay, so we achieved 12 of 14, 12 of 13, and 12 of 14. So we have 2 in priority 1, 2 in priority 2 was breached, and 1 in priority 3 was breached. Okay. So we're now starting to look better. I have 90% as my threshold here. And you can see I have 2 of these that did not meet that threshold because 12 of 14 is only 85% and 12 of 14 is only 85%. 12 of 13, there's no value here. It's above 90%. There is a setting for this. So if we go in SLA styles, I can show the, by default it's turned off, but I can show the achieved percent. I can, if I had no data in one of these boxes, for example, I didn't have a priority 3 SLA for a certain month and there was no data here, I could turn that off. I can also turn off this achieved in total columns if I didn't want those counts there. I can turn it off and just make it simple of percent achieved and the threshold for each, but I like seeing those values. I can also change the colors. I'm going to change those just because I like a little, I don't like that actually. There we go. There we go. And the other thing I can do is if I want different headers here, so instead of achieved, I could change that total incidents. Maybe it's not incidents that I'm looking at. I'm looking at SLAs on something else. I could just say total, or I could change the value in there. And then maybe I don't, maybe I just want the threshold. So I can override the labels there also. The same is true for the labels of the SLA definitions. Maybe the labels I have coming from the data are too long. I could have my own labels there. So now that we have that set up, we can see that in January, we have a priority 2 issue. In March, we had priority 2 and priority 1. And in June, we had priority 1 and priority 3. Those are the SLAs that we didn't meet our threshold of 90% in those months. Again, pretty powerful, especially when you start thinking about reporting on your SLAs and the work that's required to get that done. Now we have a nice table that allows you a bunch of configuration to set up how you want it, but ultimately to give you a nice visual of how it works.